So we are starting. So for the folks who don't know, I have with me Prakhar Gupta on the podcast, which goes by the name of Shifting Thought Project. Now, by this time now, I'm pretty confident that our audiences are quite linked, so people would know who Prakhar Gupta is. But still, I would like to give an intro. Prakhar Gupta is a student of economics and psychology in University of Columbia. He is the host of a podcast that goes by the name of PG Radio, and he has another YouTube channel that goes by the name of Prakhar Ke Pravachan, which I truly, honestly do not understand. And
Right.
there it is. Thanks for being here, man. Thanks for being here. Thanks for taking on the time.
Array, the pleasure is all mine. When you asked, I could not say no. I was like, this sounds like a good idea. So I'm really looking forward to how the conversation goes.
Same here. Absolutely. So let me give you a small brief about what this podcast is like. So you need to consider all my podcasts are more or less progressing in a storytelling machine. And the way the story actually goes forward is there's a narrative going on, and every story has a past tense, there's a present tense, and there's a future. So right now in this podcast, the goal is to understand who Prakhar is and tell the story of Prakhar Gupta and how it aligns with the goals of PG Radio as well as Prakhar Ke Pravachan. And to set the narrative here. So I believe we met somewhere. No, we did not meet in person actually. We have met through the community of Avalon. And I think our conversation somewhere started around October or November. It was in Abhinav Chikara's group, ABNUX2. That is where our conversation started. And that's how I got to know. And so I believe we also did a group hangout session on Abhinav's channel as well. If I am catching correctly, right? It was somewhere around in May. And okay, yeah, you know what? You have something to say. I believe that you have something to say. And let's go.
No. I mean, you were getting the facts right. I think we were first acquainted on the Avalon thing. I think I met Warren sometime the end of November for a podcast.
Yeah.
And then I joined the Avalon group, and I think we might have been acquainted there first. But the only time spoken to each other has been on Abhinav's live stream that I think happened sometime during the lockdown. So you got the facts right. Yep.
Okay. So now here's an intersection here. Now, when I actually got to know of you, and and there was a little bit of friction in both of our messages. Even at some point in time in the group, you had said, "Bro, tu mujhe like nahi karta kya?" That was a very specific statement you said. And that made me actually ponder over the fact as to who this guy is and, what exactly is his motives. So if I was to say something about myself, I consider myself to be a very cynical person. I'm trying to not be a cynical person, but somewhere along the line, I'm getting to become more and more cynical. I look through the lines. I'm trying to shift and bifurcate, what they are trying to say versus who they become. And somewhere there was a friction where I also saw, and I had to reflect upon myself. Am I being intimidated by this guy, or is there something that I'm not looking at him? So this is my purpose. Now I want to understand who is exactly Prakhar Gupta, and my misunderstanding of you initially was a bit wrong. I'm willing to accept that. But again, so let's actually get started on that point. So our conversation was more or less likely on Telegram related to the fact that, I was intimidated, or maybe there was some sort of friction related to the fact that on YouTube, for a fact that, people exist who are motivation peddlers or positivity peddlers. There's a market for it. And most people who are not acquainted with the right set of skills, they actually choose this very specific domain on YouTube.
Hold up. I think there's an assumption that goes there. We'll pinpoint that and we'll come back to it. Finish, please.
So my assumption actually went towards the direction that, I have not exactly heard of this guy, but he's pretty confident. He's pretty smart. What exactly is he going to sell me? And that's where a bit of a negative perception formed in my mind, where I thought that, Prakhar might not be such a good guy in my mind. And over time, I've come to realize.
Not be a good guy at all.
Yeah, that's also true.
Right.
There are always a lot of incentives aligned that, people are not able to see. And this podcast is basically to actually break out certain narratives that are playing on in people's heads and to take them forward. Now, I really would want you to speak something, honestly.
All right. I mean, I was waiting if there was a question that follows towards the end of it.
Okay.
So as far as that is concerned, here is what I'll say, right?
Okay.
And maybe this will sound a wee bit more intimidating than it won't, but here is what I'll say. And well, fuck it. That was meant to intimidate you. It was pretty much meant to remind you that you're taking yourself too seriously. And that was done through the reflective lens of why are you taking me so seriously? And not intimidate in the most negative sense of, but there was a pushback. That was because I don't remember what the context of the conversation was. I was like, there is needless flack from this end.
Yeah.
And I don't take my life seriously. I don't take myself seriously enough. So I was like, you know what? I'll just crack a joke. And I did crack a joke, and it seemed to have worked many months on. Yeah, there seems to be positive reports about it. Like I said, this is just strangers acquainting themselves. When people form social groups, they do not understand each other, they do not understand the boundaries of each other. And initially, this friction is pretty much the most valid way to get across to making friends. So hopefully, from that point on, we move to a place where you and I see eye to eye. Right? The reason why I'm here at your podcast, or the reason why you'd invite me, is because we see eye to eye. So, I don't know what else to say about it. I think that's an event done and dusted in the past.
Okay, so here the conversation actually goes into the direction of what exactly Prakhar ke pravachan is, because I've already set the precedent that I'm a very cynical person, and all these
Right.
Baba type look, they actually send a very weird vibes to me that they are just selling something. They don't want anything to do with you. And Prakhar ke pravachan, the term itself is so much like Baba. And
It is
yeah, exactly.
strategically.
It's strategically, and so what you have done with Prakhar ke pravachan, from what I understand so far, is that you have created a persona of a Baba, and who is trying to help people who are, so if I'm guessing this correctly, your current market, or the people who are actually listening to you, are young males in their ages of 17 to 24, if I'm right?
18 to 35, yes.
18 to 35. Yeah, that's, so
Yes.
there's a small misassumption on my end here. But again, so that is where my, conversation got actually.
Skepticism for
got
my
out to
work stems.
Exactly. So I want you to actually help me understand what exactly is Prakhar ke pravachan. Help me through that
Right.
lens.
Okay, it is unique that I have to fill in the blanks for your own skepticism, but here is what Prakhar ke pravachan is about.
Yeah.
I do not think any kind of a cynic or a skeptic is in the right place to say that the truths of life are obvious. I don't think they, of all the people, have, I think spiritual and religious people, who I do not have a lot of respect for either, have more right to say that they understand the truths of the world than people who are skeptical by nature. Because if you're married to your idea, then you're not skeptic. So, and it is also not surprising that most of the truths about life, fundamentally important to our existence or to our day-to-day, are not evident, obvious, or even sometimes material for us to infer. Right?
Okay.
So these were not obvious truths to me growing up. What were obvious truths to me were: earn your money, get your job, get your wife, get your kids, get your family, all that jazz. I grew up around that, and I was like, well, I don't find that entertaining enough for myself. And what I did find entertaining enough for myself were the question answers that I was having in my head. And I was 17, 16, something along those lines, and I wasn't very thorough with having those answers. And when I tried to ask people who were older, who I'd look up to, they had no better answers. They would often close the lid by saying, "Itna sochte hi nahi hai." And so that added fuel to the fire. I was like, "Tum nahi sochte, main sochunga." And from all that years of thinking, I finally arrived at a place where I was like, "Okay, theek hai, Prakhar, you've thought whatever you've thought. You need to go verify the shit out of this." So I went to Columbia, and I followed a very academic chain of thought to figure out to put a citation before every word that I speak,
Okay.
to know exactly what is being borrowed from where, for what intent. And I spent about 2.5, 3 years doing that, only for my personal interest. This was never like, I'm going to be on YouTube doing this.
Okay.
I was having the time of my life. I was finally coming to a place where I was like, okay, there is some clarity. When in January this year, a friend of mine was hanging out with me, and he's like, bro, tu pravachan deta to rehta hi hai. And this was done in irony. My friends hate the fact कि मैं उनको बैठा के 2 घंटा philosophy सुनाता हूँ. They were like, तू प्रवचन देता तो रहता ही है, तू YouTube पे कर दे. And I was like, Prakhar ke pravachan. And that's where the name came up. The name is ironical. The whole intent is to remind people कि ये प्रवचन से फर्जी चीज कोई नहीं होती. अगर तुम ढूंढने निकलोगे, you'll find your answers yourself. And if you go through the content, okay, and as far as the assumption about particular domain of market and whatnot is concerned, here is what I think about this audience. I have respect for this audience. And the reason why I have respect for this audience is because they're self-aware and they're humble enough to admit that they need help. You think my dad does not need answers to those questions? He does not even know he has those questions until he watches my videos. And that is what I'm talking about. As soon as you're 27, 28, 29, 30, you put sand over a fire and forget that there was ever a fire pit in that place at all. And then you continue life, because your life can be boiled down to a few elements: A, C, E, F, G, whatever, A, B, C, D, mera ho gaya, theek hai, make money, spend time with family, whatever. And you never delve deep enough to ask yourself the question, why the hell are you not free? Because you're not. Right? And so that is the attempt. The attempt is to finger people enough to the point where they start seeking their own freedom. That is what Prakhar ke pravachan is about.
Interesting. So, okay, so one question arises from this scenario is that, PG radio is something that you are doing with a lot of interest. If I'm getting this right, PG radio is your baby, is your child, that you are going to put a lot of effort in, life, sweat, blood, everything. But Prakhar ke pravachan is something, is although kind of weird scenario here that, it is growing much faster than PG radio. So how do you actually contemplate the two in this regard?
How do I put them in picture for myself?
Yes.
PG radio is my personal whims. Prakhar ke pravachan is everybody else's.
Can you repeat? Your audio just got muffled.
PG radio is everything that I want to know from whoever I want to find out. And that is my personal means of putting a mic before people who are interesting enough to teach me new things. And then I ask them about all those new things. That's whimsical on my end. I don't care who listens to it. I don't give a shit who has time for it. I don't care what your taste is. I don't care if you don't understand. That's for me. And it's also on the side on YouTube, right? Yeah. That is me playing a long-term game. I'm building a portfolio for myself, whatever you might want to think about. Not a career portfolio, an intellectual portfolio for myself. Set of learnings that I've acquired firsthand, great stories and whatnot. Prakhar ke pravachan is me, let's say, I don't want to say pooping, but in the sense, it's just me vomiting out all the stuff that I've spent time with up until PG radio arrived. So Prakhar ke pravachan is purely on the whims of everybody else. What is the answer to the question that you seek? All right, come here. I have an answer. At least I have a way of thinking about it. And so it operates from the premise where it seeks to feed its audience, but not in a dishonest, untruthful fashion. Like that is unacceptable to me. Go ahead.
Yeah. So actually, that's what I was actually getting at. See, now my skepticism actually came to the fact that there are certain people who create a persona of who they are exactly not. And they are trying to make sure that the audience perceives them in that persona itself. And to me, actually, that is what I found to be somewhat flawed, or even go as far as to say it's some kind of a fraud you're doing. If there is an individual who doesn't do that, I'm not talking about you, Prakhar Gupta. I'm talking about individuals that exist. You and I are both acquainted with that. And sorry?
You mean the general you, not you, the specific you, huh?
Yeah, it's a general you. So on YouTube, you have come across these folks. I'm pretty sure damn sure that you have spoken to these folks as well. Now, so the first thought actually, so, I listened to a couple of, your podcasts literally today itself. And it was not on PG radio, but it was on Prakhar ke pravachan. So I was listening to a couple of your conversations with Shwetab Gangwar. That's when I got, I was able to connect the dots that, okay, this guy is not exactly selling any of this thing. What he's thinking right now and what he's contemplating, the information that he has got right now, he's just putting it out there. But that's what Prakhar ke pravachan is doing. Right? Sure. And that's when I realized, that, Bhuvanyu, you are being a fucking fool here. Is that you are just trying to just judge a guy based on the prejudices that you had in the past. And that's where you should be wrong. You should actually have a conversation with the guy. The guy is actually pretty smart. So let's see where the conversation takes us. And that's when I thought, I need to have a word with you. That was my realization here. So where do you see it? So PG radio is not exactly a portfolio building. It's just your it's your thirst quenching exercise for intellectual curiosity, right?
Kind of.
But Prakhar ke pravachan, now seeing that level of growth, and it recently started. You know that.
6 months.
Exactly. In 6 months, you have actually surpassed a very good number for most folks. I'm seeing your growth trajectory to be pretty high. And as a matter of fact, even I got so many ads of Prakhar Ke Pravachan on Instagram that I was kind of like, I know what this guy is saying, but why am I getting these ads again and again? So that made me realize that maybe there exists a market like that. And I cannot discount the fact that the market out there is stupid. Because if market is listening to something, then maybe there is some value to it. That was my realization, utter realization here. And so, where do you see Prakhar Ke Pravachan going? That made me ponder the question.
So, right. So, as far as something you'd said about wearing masks, people being something else in front of the camera and being something else other than the camera, I like to think that has been a personal disgust factor for me since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Right? And I cannot stand that because I can see through that. And that's something. So I've always believed that there has to be a unitary performance. There has to be only one performance because all social behavior is performance. There is no denying that. So I understand why when the camera switches on, the audience changes. As soon as the audience changes, your performance changes.
Yeah.
And I've always felt that there needs to be some kind of a unity in your performance. There has to be, at least, it's not like I'm looking at a different person when I'm seeing Prakhar on camera versus Prakhar in person. So the intent was always to put out singular parts of my personality, right? PG Radio has a part of my personality that is commonly found when I'm speaking in English. It's very calm, collected. It's usually very incisive. Prakhar Ke Pravachan, like I said, is a vomiting exercise in not the negative sense, but in the sense like where I'm having fun, where I'm doing the fuck I want.
Yeah.
And therefore, eventually I realized, listen, you need to put the rest of Prakhar out there too. And that's when I started doing the live streams. And that made me realize that YouTube is a lot more about connections than it is about almost anything else. And the fact that I was willing to take that risk on behalf of everybody watching the conversation made them connect to me. I still think about it very often. Is it fine? Because listen, you like the idea of exhibition. You like your art to be showcased. You like people to applaud to it. That is all true. That is all biological. There is no denying that.
True.
But at the same time, you don't want all of you exposed. It's a very naked feeling.
Yeah.
You hide, you cover as soon as the entirety of you is exposed. The metaphor is feeling naked, right?
Yes.
So it's a balancing act. And what I'm trying to figure out is to what degree can Prakhar exist on YouTube and to what degree can Prakhar save himself from the public life. But the intent again is to remind people that the paradigms that they exist, the stories that they tell themselves are all very flexible if they were to look at it carefully enough. And I think, you know how the saying goes that the map is not the territory. You heard that?
Yeah, I have heard that.
Right? So the idea being that the territory, Mumbai, is different from the map of Mumbai. When you walk through Mumbai, it's very different from imagining walking through the map. And if reality is the territory, language is the map. And if you understand and you can connect the mechanics of a phenomena from A to Z in language properly, you can notice, you can edit, you can hack, you can optimize, you can upskill, you can do all those things from there. And so the intent is for people to understand absolutely from first principle, the fuck is happening to them. I'm sorry, I'm going back to profanity.
No, it's okay.
This much is okay. The shit is happening to them when they feel like they're not good enough, because there is a very obvious psychological dynamic that's happening that no psychologist or psychoanalyst or psychological theorist or philosopher will take a stab at. And the reason they won't is because there is too much dynamism. Psychology as a discipline does not include the idea that there is an internal dynamic happening. It's not obvious to psychology. And the psychoanalysts are all dead. So it's sort of my own version of philosophy, psychoanalysis, psychology, biology, evolution, economics, game theory, all rolled into one. All the things that have interested me since I was a kid, religion, all rolled into one to make sense of life. And I think one of the most underrated parts about the process of thinking that, oh my God, people don't notice, is the process of sense making in some sense. And what that means is, I think Leo Strauss made, it was either Strauss or it was Dewey, some 20th century philosopher made a case for the fact that reality is not obvious that there is a very clear distinction between facts and values.
Yes.
That there are facts. This is a phone, and
That is
then
the
there is
fact.
a value. Right? The value is I can use it as a calculator, I can use it as a telephone, I can use it as a surfing device, whatever.
Yeah.
And so the question arose that do values precede facts, or do facts precede values? Can, should, all that, the variations of those questions arise. And the process of making sense of facts is different from fact finding. So you can find facts, you can be a
Yes.
Dhruv Rathi, you can find facts, and
Yes.
uske baad there is a process of stringing them together to
To a
make sense
value.
of reality, actually create the map of reality, hai na? And that is the job, that is the service I offer. I reimagine your reality for you.
That makes a lot of sense here. So I don't exactly call it a value in my perspective here. I use it. I call it a utility. Where they say utility, actually you are extracting from any fact that you have around you. So you call it value, and this actually kind of goes in similar to what I'm doing here with my podcast as well. So I'm genuinely curious to actually have a conversation with folks that I get to learn from. That's the entire purpose of this podcast. And if the viewers are able to, extract something of value from these conversations that we are having, then I think that purpose is achieved. But over time, and there is a very specific thing that you said, YouTube is a networking game. If you are able to build a very large network,
When did I say
then
that?
at some point you said in the conversation that YouTube works with a lot of networks.
No, I
In our
said
conversation,
connections matter more.
connections, yeah.
As in to the audience, not networking as in like your scale network. Huh?
Okay, so you are not
I meant,
considering YouTube to be like that, if I'm
no,
not
of
wrong.
course I am. I'm just saying I did not say it yet.
Okay, yeah. So I'll just bring upon that point. So over time,
Sure.
as you continue to grow, this level of networking is needed, and that is when you actually come across true faces of individuals that you thought were behind the camera and as well. So how does that actually going? How is that going to affect Prakhar Gupta as an individual?
When my audience scales,
Exactly, that's when, and you get to interact
see,
with the audience at that scale as well as you interacting with people who have such scalable audience as you are.
so I'm interacting with people with way more audience than I have,
That is true.
and I found that they acquire some sort of respect for me to entertain me more than once. Otherwise, there is no benefit that they'd have from me. I don't have any numbers. I don't have any money to give them. None of that is really happening. So there is a mutual respect I share with a lot of people who are far more, who've been playing this game far better than I have been, or for far longer, or whatever, XYZ, ABC, right?
That's true.
And let's see, most people I've found who have met actually, and I think how many people from YouTube have I really met? I think there's just one person. I've only met Shwetab in real life.
He's
ठीक
awesome.
है?
He's
And
awesome.
Shwetab Gango. Shwetab's a kick-ass guy, man. मतलब वो पीछे भी ऐसा ही है, वो आगे भी ऐसा ही. There's no hiding.
Apart
I,
from
I,
the amount of profanity he uses, he's awesome guy. He just in our conversation itself, and these are not on camera, but I have spoken to him a lot of times. So he's an awesome guy. He knows what he's doing, and he's not going to change himself for the fact that somebody else is perceiving him in a different manner. That's the
Sure.
best thing that I like about him.
Sure. So apart from Shwetab, I haven't met anybody in person to make a judgment, and Shwetab's only proven me. He's only made me happier in the sense that there is an authentic person behind him. The other person I've been close to from YouTube is Varun, and it's the same goes for Varun. Like in and out, same person as far as I've seen, but I haven't met him. But to go back, and in fact, I've had it the other way. I've known people in real life who have gotten to YouTube, my friends, and they haven't
Yes.
changed a single millimeter. So that is pretty amazing. I'm glad they're making the transition like that. Now, as far as the question about how is it going to be when I scale, here is what happens. When I'm speaking to you, I can look at you. I can create an image of you in my head, and then I
Yes.
can interact with that image as I speak. Right?
That's
But
true.
when I'm speaking to the camera, I have to create an imaginary person.
Yeah.
And that imaginary person is a consequence of all heuristics and biases and all that bullshit that happens in your head when you're not noticing. So, say Prakhar has 25K people on YouTube and only 20 comments appear on a video. And all those 20 comments are Prakhar's a piece of shit. Now, the rest of the 24,980 people might have liked Prakhar's stuff, but Prakhar's representative audience in his head is those people who thinks he's shit. So when he starts creating a video, he's creating a video for that person properly, depending on how the internal dynamic of his head works.
Yes.
So you have to imagine one person. And in imagining that one person, I think what very often happens is that you have to leave out a lot of others. And my organic attempt is to see if I can include everybody when I try and theorize. Right? This is this.
That's needed, kind of.
Needed maybe, but here is it. Right? So there is an instinctive desire in humans to unify all phenomena, and it's quite impossible as we find, right? So probably it's the same instinct, but I try to carry as many people along as I can, and that's why sometimes I leave my stuff very open-ended, so that you put in yourself and your context. That's not on me. I don't know your context. I don't know the number of details that are playing out in your context, right? So there is sort of that. And so it might be, well, I'm not sure, well, I'm absolutely not sure. It might be that as I scale, my commandment, my instruction, my direction might become unified, so that I can imagine one person as I'm making that video. But I think the illumination of the idea, the discussion on the dynamics of that idea will be absolutely unadulterated. It'll still deliver what it has to deliver, right? And so there is that. Then apart from that, I think live streams are a whole different ballpark as far as content is concerned. It's not the same as recording videos. When you're
That's
doing
true.
live stream, and also what you have to understand is, as a content creator, I am an idea person. I do ideas. I don't do funny stuff that's relatable to everybody, or yet at least. So what that means is that with ideas, there is a aperture that needs to open and close depending on who's listening to the idea. So if I'm speaking to Varun, I can get into more detail. I can use language that's more complex, and he'll grab on. The aperture is narrower, so he can only strictly understand what I'm trying to say.
Precisely.
Vice versa, when I'm speaking to somebody on, say, an Avalon group chat, I'd be like, okay, here is the broader concept, like, so that it's easier for them to hold in their hands. So it might be that the aperture has to become different for me when I scale, but the live streams allow me to play a whole different game, which is the feedback is instant. People feel more connected. People are literally there with you. You interact with the people. And in that sense, I think that part of me can just sit back and relax. So like when I'm talking to you, I'm me. I don't care. I don't have to pretend like I'm talking to an imaginary person. I'm talking to a real one. End of story. है ना? तो वहां पे जो वो adulteration नहीं होनी है ना, वो नहीं होती, because I have something to do apart, and that is why live streams probably work, because they're by default more authentic.
Okay, so I'll just add a couple of points here too. So you pointed out correctly to the fact that there is an instantaneous feedback loop, and right now in India very specifically, the mass audience of content creators right now we're looking at entertainment comedy. That's the majority of Indian YouTube content. And then there are folks like Tanmay Bhatt. Tanmay Bhatt actually is a very smart person who comes in, who knows the fact that this is what his audience likes, and then that's what he actually feeds them. And he doesn't have to, change even his persona. So that is where growth is, infinite. And this is a problem that I'm even seeing with the likes of Varun, that right now, because he has scaled his audience on Instagram to 100K, now he has to actually put out content that relates on a very broad level. Whereas his own personal perspective here is that he wants to go in deep. He wants to find the exact problem where that lies and wants to begin from the first principle that lies there. And as someone who is scaling their audience, it makes sense. You can go as deep as you can. But once you have scaled, will the audience be still interested? And that's where the whole entire concept. I'm sorry?
Here is the deal. The answer to that question. I've thought about it. I've thought about it even before I was any version of an artist.
Okay.
I have a friend back in America. I think he's still in New York, who's a very famous musician. Okay. And him and I were having lunch once. Very warm, beautiful day. You could hear the birds chirping and whatnot. We were having my favorite lunch, which is poke. We're eating, sitting. We're talking about his music career. We're talking about John Mayer and what's this, Ed Sheeran and all these guys, right? Like that's the crew he belongs to. Yeah. And we were talking about, and he told me something that Chance the Rapper said. And he said, the audience does not know what it wants. Okay. And I think in assessing Varun, what you're not probably giving enough weight to is the fact that he knows that. That's why he gives the audience what he thinks they should have instead of what they want. So, and there was another gentleman whom I'd spoken to for my podcast, a very massive content background, who'd said something similar. He was like, listen, the rule is 80-20. You give the audience 80% of what they want, so that then you can earn the right to give them 20% of what you think they get, what you think they should have. So it becomes a balancing act where you have to answer questions like, what is self-love on one end? to then be able to teach them how serotonin pathways operate in the brain.
That
You
makes
see what I
sense.
mean?
Yeah, that was on point, quite honestly. So you actually spoke about Pareto principle here. So can I know who the person is that you spoke to? I can't know.
No, not on camera. Those are my guests. There is a privacy thing.
All right, that makes sense. So over time and again, so let's go back into the past a little bit. So you are an individual who is intellectually and genuinely curious about how things work and is looking for answers. This is
I'd
where
like to believe so.
even, okay, okay,
I'd like to
and
believe so. Yes.
and our acquaintance of both Varun and Abhinav is similar on a very similar intersection, that we are looking for answers. We don't have all the answers, and that's what creates our pursuit. So I want to understand what the 16-year-old Prakhar Gupta was thinking when he actually was doing his chartered accountancy,
I was thinking.
right?
No, 16. I was nowhere near chartered accountancy
Oh,
at
sorry.
16. It
Yeah,
was happened like
back
17,
then you would
18.
have been in school. Yeah, sorry.
School, right?
Yeah, you would have been in school.
So school and last 2 years of school, first 2 years of CA, all I was thinking was how to get a girlfriend. That's all.
Okay,
How to get a girlfriend, how to be cool. No, how to be cool died, I think, with school. Was mostly how to get a girlfriend, which
mostly
is
was
which is
how to.
like which is mostly the unarticulated parts of every that undergirds every desire, right? So it's like that's the unconscious motivation, that's the id, that's the biological impulse. And what it is that I want to establish myself in a social circle, and the fastest way to do that instinctively is to be validated by a woman.
That's
Again,
true.
biological, id, psychoanalytical, unconscious, all that. So that
You,
was mostly what I was thinking about. And I mean, I'd always been passively interested in things that were with use of the mind. I'd always been. I was a chess player since I was a kid. I was fairly good with my academic life. I was also very proficient at speaking and speeches and debates and all that jazz, quizzes. So I was always fascinated by that. There was never an active attempt. Probably was a compensatory mechanism for me to actually find a girl, because I was also not a looker. I was not a looker, and I was pathetic at talking to women. Like literally, I fainted on occasion. And I mean, I remember the first girlfriend I had. For months, my legs would just shake looking at her. I would just like run out of breath and I'd have nothing to say. So that was the background. And I was also I also wanted last 2 years of high school for my friends to accept me and like me, like in the sense where I'd play foot. I was interested in soccer anyway, but I would play it more. I'd hang out with them more. That's a sort of a social conformism that happens for you to be accepted by the group. After that, also for a little bit, there was some of that. And I think things began to change towards the end of 2014 when I met a newer set of friends who were more stable in their mind, where I did not have to vie for their attention. And I think I got a girlfriend around that time. And so that allowed a new canvas to emerge and for me to rebuild reality. And in that rebuilding of the reality, the most obvious, the most fundamental questions began to arise. So why should I work? What is the need of money? What is the concept of money? Why should
okay.
I continue to live? I'm so bored. What does boredom mean? And then that series of things started happening. So I used to have sort of a gathering every night in my mom's garden, and whoever wanted to come could come. The rules were simple. You bring the intoxicant of your choice. I bring the rules of the conversation. You bring the topic of your choice. And mostly people would start off with intellectual topics, spiritual, religious, whatever they did not understand, and they'd come down to personal problems. And very quickly I was listening to people's problem on scale to an effect where it was like, why are people just telling me this shit? क्यों बताओगे तुम मेरे को? What is happening? And then someday somebody said, after having like an hour or two long session with me, he was like, you changed my life. And I was like, okay, bro, fuck yeah, And I would watch people's expressions as I'd speak. I'd watch people's expressions when I'd explain things, and they'd be dumbfounded. They'd be like, oh my God, I never looked at it like that. And so what I did was, I formalized that entire thing. I started writing a little bit here and there.
Okay.
And that writing made me very happy, because I was like, I'm finally getting to express what I think. But it made very little sense to people around me, partly because it was terrible writing, partly because, well, I was very esoteric in that sense. So I was continuing to do my chartered accountancy, and I started applying to universities abroad. One day I had a waking up call where I was like, I cannot continue to live this lie any longer. This disgusts me about me. It's the same appearance thing. My parents want me to मैं कर लूँगा. That's an appearance that I'm wearing. Well, fuck that. I can't. And so I started applying to American universities. And that is how the principle of like independent action taking got built into me. Because I was like, listen, I'm 20. I was 20, I think. No. I was 19. Right?
Okay.
Way past the point, 2 years past the point where people usually apply to universities for a bachelor's. My parents wanted me to do CA. They were like, "Tum dekh lo whatever you want to do on the side, but CA khatam kar lo." So all of the effort of trying to apply to a good school in the United States and getting through, and then making sure it was worth it, and making sure I had the money for it, and like I'm not going to quit on it. All that jazz had to happen on my end. There was going to be no tuitions. There was going to be no counselors. There was going to be no essay writers and grammar checkers, and none of that at all. Yeah. And so that was the first place where I was like, "ठीक है, bro, let's start from scratch. Let's try and understand." Because if you do CA, CA is all assisted on the outside. CMA, you'll have coaches and teachers and they have all that jazz happening. And usse pehle school, which is also spoon-fed. So I started doing SAT ka prep. And the way I did SAT ka prep was, I was like, I figured out a formula. And maine us formula ko repeat kiya incessantly until I started scoring anywhere close to 2400, 2300 without a problem. And I scored a very good SAT score in my finals. Or I started applying, and I was like, the only way I'll go to America is if I get into a top-notch university. Otherwise, nahi ja sakte. Ya America, ya UK. And I did get through to Oxford. I did get through to NYU, and I got through to Columbia. Oxford rejected me last round, but those with Kings accepted me. There were some schools in UC, जिन्होंने accept कर लिया था, but after Columbia there was no talking. And this was the same day as CA का result, which I failed. So I was like, ठीक है, तो गुस्सा भी है, ठीक है, there's गर्मी, let's get out of here. And that's when I packed my bags and I was like, I'm not going to finish CA. मेरे से नहीं होगा, मैं सबको मार दूंगा, मेरे से ये नहीं हो सकता, जाने दो मेरे को. And that's how I left for the United States. That's the story.
That's interesting. So there are so many points that I actually do want to talk about, but as the conversation progresses, maybe we can get a chance to do that. So let me understand from the and I'll just try to explain it in a layman's term. You were trying to actually, in your social circle that you were part of, you were trying to project an image of who you were as trying to become cool. And becoming cool also resonated with the fact that having a girlfriend is kind of important in your early days, right?
Roughly. We'll come to the details of it. Go ahead, finish your thesis.
And once you actually got the confidence that, I don't have to worry about this thing, because the entire life of, and this is what I feel that every Indian goes through, is that, your entire life is predicated on a set of rules that if you obey, you might be good in your parents' eyes. And that's how I think mediocrity comes from. Believe me, there are so many things that irks me a lot. It irks me so bad that I can't even say. But basically, Indian parents are more or less trying to make their children aim for mediocrity. That's how I'm right now looking at things, with the way things are playing out. And somewhere along the line, you also realized this, and that's when you said, what, fuck it, and I'll just go on. I'll do my own thing, even if I have to start from scratch. And that's where PG Radio and Prakhar Ke Pravachan came to being. Tell me if I'm...
No. PG Radio, Prakhar Ke Pravachan still years away. We are still years away.
Okay, it's still years away. So you got to the realization that, okay, this is where I was, but now I have to start from scratch. And you got into Columbia. Now, please continue ahead. Where am I wrong?
So,
yeah.
Primarily, let's go back to what you said, right? Sabse pehle you said something about projecting an image. There wasn't as much projecting an image as there was an active need to conform, which means that was authentic. Like, I authentically liked soccer when I was playing it with them. I authentically wanted to play a different position than I was, because so it wasn't as much like I'm a different person when I go back home. Is that the person who leaves home is trying to change himself when he's outside. So there is sort of that. Then as far as me realizing something, it wasn't that I realized that my parents were carving me for some kind of mediocrity, as it was just that I don't want to do this. Yeah, you cannot make personal decisions on social counts. What it is primarily proximate, which is no more of this. That is it. So there was genuinely no more of that. There was no uske upar ki sari baatein that I'd said back then, that I still do say sometimes. in private, or if I'll make a video about chartered accountancy and whatnot. Back then, when I was leaving and I wanted to leave, everything I said, apart from the fact that I want to leave, was a lie. Was not really a lie. Was a rationalization. Was a reason I was giving myself, because I just did not want to do it anymore. Fact of the matter is, I hated it. That is it. There was no meritocratic complaint. Like there was no CA तो बकवास कोर्स है, ठीक है, वो तो 2 साल पहले भी था दोस्त, वो तो उससे भी पहले था. I wanted to leave because I wanted to leave. So in all fairness, when you're critical of yourself in retrospect, you can weave out everything that you said that does not make sense anymore. So that is as far as that is concerned. Okay, so I go to Columbia and I sit in my first philosophy class because that's what I want to study. And the first philosophy class, we're discussing Descartes, we're discussing, what's the other guy's name? We're discussing all that jazz, right? And it's basic philosophy. And when you teach basic philosophy, you start from ये एक है कि दो है, चलो इसको question करके देखते हैं. You start with that. You start with absolutely fundamentals. Do bats see the same way as humans do? You start with बिल्कुल. And when I started reading, I was like, भाई ये तो सर के ऊपर से जा रहा है, ये तो obvious बात है. Obviously ना, कि Descartes' second meditation is, or sixth meditation is, I don't know if you're an automaton or if you're real. Right? अबे obvious, और हूं मैं automaton, तू मान के चल मैं real हूं क्योंकि मैं तेरी जान ले सकता हूं. समझ रहा है? तो मेरे लिए तो वो फिलॉसफी वहां खत्म हो गई. I cannot cope with him going on for 3 pages and calling it a meditation. That's a masturbation. That's not meditation. So my reaction was, well, this is something I cannot make peace with, and that is the class I have the lowest grade in at Columbia. I think I got a C. This was first semester. Meanwhile, I was also sitting in an economics class, and that class was phenomenal. That was being taken by an Indian American gentleman who also heads the United States Soccer Federation and FIFA, and like he's involved, big time player, okay? And he had a charm about him, man. Like when he'd walk in, 200 bloody students intent who'd signed up day one to be around this guy. He had a charm, he had a whole thing, and he was mean in his thing, and people liked it because he was mean in like a very, there was no, he was just bloody mean. He unapologetic as hell. And so there was this thing about him. So I settled for economics. I was like, I'm going to see a few more classes. And I went on another search to see what I wanted to study with economics. So I sat in religion. It was kind of interesting. I sat in film, which was, well, very interesting, and film theory. So it was like philosophy of art, that kind of jazz. And then I ended up in evolutionary psychology. And I was like, okay, thank you. Thank you so much. This is the first principle approach to life I want. This is also covering things that are relevant instead of just abstract. My professor walks in day one. He's like, listen, I'm going to fix your Tinder and Bumble like nobody else will. And I was like, real guy, I like that. And I'm still friends with that professor. We still hang out. We'll still talk about all this, right? So this was a summer. This was summer 2018. I started doing this. And summer 2018, I started doing this. Absolutely have the best time. I spent a year or so like intermittently traveling while I was studying. So I had enough time to reflect upon all of that. And I was like, I'll stick with psych. Economics and psych kar raha tha main. One December, I think this was December 2018 itself, I was hanging out with a friend here, and all my ideas begin with, I was hanging out with a friend. And I was like, bro, I'm convinced I should start a podcast. I was like, I'm great with conversation, bro. I think I should do that while I'm still at college. Might as well give it a shot. And he's like, bro, main bhi yahi soch raha tha. And then I'm like, Sale, tu mera idea churayega. He's like, Sale, tu mera idea churayega. Both of us start a podcast right after. And the first 20 or so episodes, what I do is I speak to every friend who's interesting around me. And I'm dumb like that. I had no concept of winning. I had no concept of market. I had no concept of like product fit. None of that. I was like, ऐसा है, किसी को तो सुनना होगा, इनसे बात करते हैं, इनको बिठा लो, अच्छा तुम्हें तुम्हारी जिंदगी क्या है. और उन podcast में one of the, like if you listen to them, they're still all on YouTube and Spotify and whatnot. Well, I'm doing a terrible bloody job. I'm speaking way more than my guest. What the hell are you doing? And that is me trying to discover, I'm interrupting them, I'm taking them in places that's not natural. Like it's very evident. So I go through a series of like learning and all of that until I think I speak to a professor once. And the professor was Scott Barry Kaufman, who I have very genuine respect for because he set me free. Once I spoke to him, I was like, bro, you can play the bigger games. So I started approaching bigger players. And that bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger went so far ahead that at this point I'm speaking to people, well, I would be honored and privileged to have a conversation with. Okay? So that is how PG Radio's trajectory went. In the meanwhile, that happened last January, hanging out with a friend. He's like, bro, tu pravachan to deta hi rehta hai. And so I was like, acha, theek hai, this could be another product. So PG Radio from there could be classified. I could classify it very easily as, what is known in the industry as a classy product and Prakhar ke Pravachan as a massy product.
So there's a very fundamental
That's the
difference
story.
between actually you and me here in this regard. So, and this is why I actually even relate to Varun a lot in this very context here. So, at what point in time that you realize that, you know what, my financial stability is so much done that I can now take time to ponder on these questions that I have been meaning to ask?
Are you asking when was that point for me?
Yes.
I I've been lucky enough to never have felt the financial slap on my face. So I mean that is exactly why I could listen. Confusion breeds in comfort, and I
True.
had too much comfort, and that's why I was confused. So my father has done tremendously well for himself, and that under the warmth of his light, I could sit and think. So there was also that, and plus there was also the fact that I knew how to optimize my student situation very well. What people
Okay.
forget when they're students is that they're not just students; they're also free people on the side,
True.
right? And so when I was doing my chartered account, I was also experimenting with random shit. I was also experimenting with random shit when I was at Columbia, and in that process, I was like, you know what, this could be a financially viable option. So by the time I'm done studying, which is to the extent I'd like my parents to support me, I'd have enough money to be like, okay, chalo, milte hain baad mein.
Okay. So, okay, so I'll just give you a small context of on my end, so that would actually help frame the conversation moving forward. Is that from 2014 to 2018, I spent my time in gym. I fucking hated college. That's the truth. I got in for engineering BTech, and that was around 2013 to 2017. First year, I realized that I hate this. I don't hate science. I still love science. But what they were teaching me in college is what somebody was internally. I was internalizing that I'm getting angrier, angrier. That's what I was feeling, and maybe it was kind of a financial trouble at the time, or maybe something like that. That my needs were not being met, and I was spending so much time in gym, and it was through
In the
adversity.
gym.
Yeah, and it was through that adversity that I started to ask certain questions that ponder upon me. See, what am I doing in the gym? See, I don't have any desire of becoming a bodybuilder, but somewhere internally I was venting out my frustration, going to the gym and finding out answers. And eventually what happened, I came out of the gym sometime, and it actually happened this year itself, that I came out and became somewhat of a narcissist. Now, I don't know if I told you this, so I am part of Avalon Meda's Pro League, undergoing through Shashank. And that was the best experience that I could have ever had. In the sense, not because of what they are teaching me. It made me realize that, I think I need humility. I am becoming too much of a narcissist that humility is actually, going away from me, or I'm adding so many prejudices in my life. That way, I think I'm better than everyone else. But this experience where I'm starting at an absolute scratch, and this is what we have also seen in primates, that if you take two primates, put them in a social hierarchy who are at the bottom, they will find a way to collaborate and then grow their way into the social hierarchy. That's how they actually achieve status. And this is my learning in real life, practical learning that I've seen. That okay, I'm just going to venture into something that I'm completely beginner at, and that's going to make me humble, and that's also going to make me ask certain questions which are needed. So that's how I think our paths kind of converge, but there is a diversion point as well here. Okay, so I hope you got this. So right now, I'll just move forward from the fact that what do you think that in India, what is going on wrong with education, with respect to psychology and with respect to what the general goal is, with what you did with decoding the millennium with birth.
Well, yours and mine is the first cosmopolitan, metropolitan, globalized generation that this country has seen. And it's very easy to forget it if you were not born for that. Right? So the obvious friction that I've come to understand between me and my parents, now that it's gotten friendlier, it's acquired shapes of curiosity and genuine like wonder for my well-being and all that jazz. What I've come to understand is that it's genuinely that they do not understand. And the reason why they do not understand what Prakhar wants to, has wanted to, will want to do is because that language and that reality evades their language and reality. So it is just a concept to alien for them, and in that in that alienation, they don't want their kids to not. When you said something about parents aiming for mediocrity, they're not aiming for mediocrity. They're aiming for stability, and stability usually is a mediocre thing to have, right?
Yeah.
And I don't blame them. Mediocrity, stability was elite 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years
Yeah.
ago, right? So I don't blame them. And so there is, on one end, there is an entire generation of leaders that are, well, that they just, I don't know, this is probably a young person's bias, but they just haven't seen the modern world. They're not apt to handle the modern world. I just don't see how a 75-year-old man, no matter what country they're in, is apt to handle the world. 40, 45, 50, sure. 70 is just too old. I don't see a logical sense, not that I'm proposing a policy around it. On the other hand, I think the question you asked is too broad. It can be approached from so many ends.
Yeah.
Educationally speaking, infrastructure, economics, blah blah blah, teacher competence. It's an endless snake. You don't know where the tail is at. Like, you don't know where it begins. There are so many things. There is, yaar, matlab, I'll tell you. So all of this might well begin with the fact that we grow cotton instead of, say, XYZ silk. Like, it genuinely will begin at that fact on a policy level. Might. Though it is not easy to determine what is wrong on a deep causal root level. On a symptomatic level, well, kids in India do not grow up to be risk takers. Kids in India do not grow up to be independent. We have, societally, we have no concept of boundaries, enterprise, and free speech, which means free thought. We also we are not able to culturally, as Hindus, distinguish between what is actually divine and what is close to divine, or even down that hierarchy. We confuse that very often. That is why Babas become Bhagwans very easily.
Yeah.
And that is primarily because there is no one, there is all, right? And so, isko bhi bana lo fir to Bhagwan jab 33 billion ho hi gaye hain, right? So there is all that, there is all of that, and I do not know how to place my opinion on the country as a whole. There are some parts of it that are just beautiful, like within the fact that there are no boundaries, there is no crisis of meaning, right? There is very little people who experience that kind of stuff that is very, very prevalent in, say, the West, where there is more individualistic societies. There is, we make for great employees around the world. In fact, if you notice, the highest per capita household income in America is Indian Americans. Why? Because they go for stability. They're still not CEO quality, but they're very good at like upper management, very good at like making sure the job's done. So, or wo bhi wahi hai. That's the same generation that ran away, and the kids are our generation roughly, who are now making that kind of money. They ran away when there was no stability in India. There was no option for stability in India. So there's a bunch of factors that are happening that we do not know. There's a inherent flaw that has been taught to us in a way that it does not appear as a flaw, which is diversity. Well, on an anthropological, sociological, like on a statistical level, on a state level, diversity is the cancer. And I'm not saying no. I'm not saying eliminate it. My point is, it just makes the problem 10 times harder when there is 10 types of different people in the stadium to ask for their rights, right? So there is language, yeah. Like, you cannot remove English suddenly, because what do I speak to somebody who's from Tamil Nadu now? I cannot. There is nothing left, right? But if I take up English, then I'm creating an entire breed of colonial cocksuckers. ये कि मतलब हमारा ट्रॉमा, हमारा स्टॉकहोम सिंड्रोम खत्म नहीं हो रहा, हमें गोरा बनना है, we want to be very like, so there is all these complications that come with India's happenstance in a way, and some of them come with the bloody incompetence that India's leaders have had. But I cannot claim to say that I'd be a better leader than them myself, so I don't know on what basis should I levy that charge on them. But I would still, from a perfect utopian place, be like, well, all of you guys have really disappointed me. So there is a lot of factors. It's not just leadership. The fact that, well, money is such a problem, man. We our average lifespans, our average mortality age was what, 35 in 1947. People were dying before they were born. Right now it's like 60, 70. So we were very poor when we were left to our means. So इसीलिए when you ask an uncle, no, when you try and criticize India to anybody who's more pro BJP than anything else, they'll be like, अरे हाँ, हमारा तो गरीब देश था. Because that explanation is the simplest way to say कि भाई हाँ यार, मतलब this is why where we are at. बाकी सब trace कर पाना causally is just too cognitively expensive. I don't know where to begin unraveling this mystery. I've spent a lot of time trying to do that. Like, as a chess player, since I was 3, my mind's molded around problem solving in a very unique way. And so I've done it. I've written about it extensively, private memoirs and whatnot. And after a certain while, you're like, भाई छोड़ दो इसे, ये नहीं हो रहा. बहुत मुश्किल puzzle है यार. क्या what is wrong with India is probably the most difficult puzzle of my life.
Okay.
I don't want to think about it anymore.
Okay. We'll just go too deep there. Okay, so I'll just quote Jordan Peterson here. Is that he has spoken specifically about the arrogance of the intellect. Right? So do you think that there are certain people in India who are right now looking down at the problem but are not capable of solving the problem? Because the entire principle of what Jordan Peterson has actually come across. Because my problem sums up in a very simplistic manner. If I'm going from a game theory point of view, we are in India very specifically, we are playing a non-zero sum game. No, I'm sorry. Let me reiterate. We are playing a zero sum game. There are finite number
like
of
the Kunal Shah wealth versus status wala jo idea hai.
Yeah.
Kunal Shah.
It's Kunal Shah, it's Naval Ravikant, it's all these people, but they are onto something.
There's a difference. There's a difference. There's a difference, okay? There's a difference. Kunal, sometimes I see Kunal write his Twitter feed and I'm like, bro, you're not even thinking properly. Like, this is such a compression of something that could have been smarter. So, aisa nahi hai that we are entirely playing a non-zero sum game. I also don't think framing that in the sense of interpersonal culture is the right way to frame the problem at all. I also don't think that the idea that there is status in wealth-driven societies is accurate. That could be a consequence. That could be arising out of a different phenomena. I don't think that's at the base of anything. So I generally think I'm not like, he's a smart guy, no doubt. Like I have respect for the guy and what he's built, no doubt. But I'm critical of somebody that does not take away the fact that I have massive respect for them, and that means everybody. That's why I'm spending time enough to think about their ideas. But sometimes what Kunal writes is just bothersome to me. He's like, bro, put in more effort, man. I'm unsure.
Okay, then look at it from a different
perspective. I'm not convinced by the argument that India is entirely a zero-sum game process. I'm genuinely not convinced. It could be.
I might be biased here. Because you have actually lived in both scenarios. You have been to the US and you have lived the life there. You have lived your life in India. So I might be biased here. So the data might be corrupted. But okay, then look at it from a very biological and a financial standpoint. In 1947, we were going through a very massive economic trauma. True. So that's what created 1947 around. That's when we actually got our independence.
Trauma, but like economic depravity, sure, yeah.
Yeah. And second, from a biological standpoint, is that, think of it, Indians were the inferior species. Till before 1947, Indians were not superior. We had colonials, we had masters. And that makes to the fact that, somewhere we, in a biological system, there are predators. And the colonialists were predators. Due to the lack of all these predators, we have found a way that now we need to multiply. And that's what happens. We have to transpose of our genes. We have to actually give them out. And that's what we actually started doing. The moment predators actually went away, we multiplied.
By that definition, the Jews would have been all over the world, man. That doesn't stand to test. It's a good hypothesis, but that doesn't stand to test. And there's so many other oppressed classes, like ye to Khalistani hai, they feel like they were oppressed. Ye to nahi multiply kar rahe speed se. There is other stuff. But go on with your hypotheses, huh?
So these are the two standpoints that I actually saw it from that. Now you are providing a different opinion here.
So you think India is a predatorial society?
India is not, no longer. India doesn't have any sort of predators. Humans no longer have any sort of predators left. Unless until you just go out in the jungle or either you go and pick a fight with someone. Humans do no longer have predators. Do you agree with me on that?
No, we have each other as predators. We acquire roles of predators and prey. I could be preying on you. You could be preying on me. I could be preying on more people. I could be getting, So this predator-prey idea is one on a purely biological level in terms of who eats who. And in terms of the theoretical concept of who eats who, there is lions and tigers and big cats and whatever that eats us. Bhalu, yes. on a metaphorical level, who eats on who instead of who eats off who. Um, Marx would say we are entirely a predatorial history. We've just predated our own, and we've predated to the point where, we could have alienated some of them to have them being lower and lesser and undeserved and black and Indian and all those things.
Yeah.
Right? So that's Marx's claim. And then he says there is a very solid, stringent economic relationship between them. And that's just not just Marx's claim. That's more. That's Ricardo's claim. That's Adam Smith's claim, by the way, free market champion. That's everybody. That's Keynes' claim. In some form or fashion, when Keynes says, in the long run, all of us are dead, what he means is, bro, listen, while you wait for the economy to fix itself, poor people are going to die.
Yeah.
So we cannot, as a system, predate on the poor. We need to give a government stimuli inside. So, it is. You have to be a little more specific as to how I draw the line. But humans have predators, and we've acquired the roles of that. We've acquired the role of the predator in so many ways. And power begets joy, man. Have you ever enjoyed like the visceral pleasure of dominating someone? Oh my God. I'm not surprised people like to do that. Like, let's be real. That's the whole point. Nobody's ever going to say that on a microphone. Nobody's ever going to say what it feels like to tell somebody to fuck off. Nobody's going to say that. But it is true. It's this very I'll tell you something. Okay? When I was working as a chartered CA article, I would go around to different banks. In my audit mein, what they'd have me do is collect bank confirmations. Okay. And I'd go to all these different banks, state banks, bloody private banks, blah, 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 all across Delhi. And once I'd walk in, they'd be like, the auditors come.
Okay.
The manager would pakad ke bitha lete the. And the managers would then talk. And then you would observe them go for your balls, right for your cooch, stick that tongue out and lick it slowly. You could see that they would go to that extent. And the whole reason is, before you dominate me, I will offer you respect. And then there will be some who would then dominate you because they like it. And I've seen government departments, and then, bro, it's very cyclical, right? Say if I was shat on, if I was dominated, I'm going to find a way to take that dominance out somewhere else. I need to feel in control of myself. Suppose मेरे पापा मेरे को dominate करते हैं, 4 लोगों का घर है, ठीक है? मैं अपनी ही सबसे proximate social hierarchy में I don't exist. I don't have autonomy. Now I need that autonomy, yaar. So I'm going to go out, dominate somebody else to compensate for that autonomy. So the predatorial behavior is inbuilt in humans.
So that's why human play games, right? That's the entirety of why games came into the picture. Why humans play games?
What kind of games?
Any sort of
Why do we play games? So, it is not clear if humans created games or games created humans.
I would say that it might be games. It might be games that created humans.
We don't know if systems create agents or agents create systems.
We don't know. But one fact that you say is absolutely true, that, if you are getting dominated somewhere else, you have the capacity to dominate someone else, you would want to do that. That's how power is actually played. That's
that is a fetish, bro. Like, it is so surprising to me that people never talk about kings when they have conversations about society. Tell me about, like, when are we going to say that a majority of people we sleep with have some form of power fetish going on for them? Either they want it or they want to relinquish it. And why is that happening? Why is it that the most private part of my bodily exercise has to do with power so deeply? What does that say about my worldview? What does that say about, or what does that not say about my worldview, for that matter? And so the cynicism that you have, I share in that sense, where I know people are lying. I was like, कमाल है यार, तुम बोलो ना, सेक्स में करते हो ये, फिर हम बोलेंगे हाँ हमें पावर नहीं चाहिए बाहर. तुम मन करते तो तुम्हें ये चाहिए, मेरे को कोई वो बोले ये बोले. हाँ.
It's not even limited to sex games, to be very honest. It's limited to everything. Now let me tell you this: like, when we, like, our group of friends, we go and play badminton out there. Let me tell you, I have the goal to dominate every single one of them, and I will absolutely try and humiliate you. Although I have to make sure that I'm still humble enough to actually accept the fact that I lost. But I have the goal to dominate each and every one of them. And that's how humans have evolved over time. People are not willing to understand that. That, find another...
Wait, hold up. You sometimes what you do is you say stuff that is in concurrence with another example, and then you move on to a conclusion that is way too quick for me. So I don't know if humans evolved like that. That is, again, for contention. I'm not validating that statement, but up until then, go on.
So
I don't think humans evolved like that. Humans evolved with other stuff too.
But
We
playing
risk the
games and
chance of facing competition.
dominating is a part where comes in intrinsically humans.
Yeah,
That's
not
what I meant.
necessarily.
Okay.
Not, matlab, it is. I'd say it is in the toolkit of our biology. Whether it gets used or not has a lot to do with environment.
Okay.
Right? So it's intrinsic. Here is what I say. Okay? Controversial statement. Once I was speaking to a friend about homosexuality and she asked me what my view was. And I was playing around with an idea.
Okay.
It wasn't my idea then. It isn't my idea now. I'm still not sure what I think about it. Like, I'm all libertarian, live your life, bloody happy for you guys, whatever. But here's what I said. I think all of us have homosexuality in the biological toolkit, which is one way of saying on some level all of us are gay. But it is what our environment cultures into that gets to become our primary sexuality, and we don't understand that connection. So it is to say that it's
I
not
agree.
natural or
Kind of
innate.
agree.
It is in your bloody gene. It is in your bloody genes. If you could suck your own dick, you'd suck your own dick. That is what is in your genes. You like pleasure. End of story. Don't tell me shit is unnatural when you don't understand nature. You know what I mean? It's your V4 and V5 are holding you back from ejaculating on your own mouth. That is who you are. Don't tell me this natural and natural bullshit. So, my
Actually,
point
a
is
friend of
that,
mine also came up with the same very argument that it's not possible in nature that it exists, but dude, you don't know what is possible and what is stopping you to do that.
bro, that's BS, man. Nobody studied nature enough to talk that walk. Anyway, walk that talk. Anyway, to get back to what you were saying. See, competitions existed, but we've understood the sobriety of competition on a genetic level, evolutionarily speaking, as well. Say you and I were to get into a fight, and I knew that I could beat you.
Okay.
I'd beat you. I'd dominate you, man. But introduce another agent, introduce Abhinav. And I know if I beat you, you're going to take enough out of me where I'm not going to be able to fight Abhinav right after. I will like, bro, chalna, chhodna, we'll not fight.
That's how they'll
समझ रहा है?
collaborate.
So,
Yeah, bilkul.
and it's not even cooperation then. It's a stalemate. It's both
That's
1, 2, and
prisoner's
3.
dilemma, if
Abhinav,
I'm not wrong. That's more than
no,
prisoner's
that's not
dilemma.
prisoner's dilemma still. It's some weird kind of biological equilibrium where we all understand if we fight, any two people fight, the third one's going to win. तो लड़ो ही मत. So we all are like, ठीक है, हम लोग we'll chill, we won't fight. So on a biological level, we've understood that. There is so it isn't clear that, and in fact, I think the more likely case is that the chemical X in the human evolutionary cauldron that led to the Powerpuff Girls of Homo sapien is cooperation, not competition. I think it's cooperation.
That makes sense. Although this might be somewhere of your forte. Okay, so we have
evolution
actually
evolution is just something I've loved studying. Huh?
Yeah, same for me here. Like I'm still, going through Richard Dawkins' book, but it's taking a little bit of time.
Selfish gene?
Yeah, selfish gene. Yeah, I'm still going through that. So overall, it actually makes sense. But we have gone through the concept of, what makes India wrong. We have spoken about each other. So let's go into the future. Let's take the story into the future. What does Prakhar want to do next? These things are already growing, but have fun. But what does fun constitute for Prakhar Gupta? Is it just having sex and having babies? Or is it somewhere else?
I mean, if it was having babies, I'd have babies by now.
Yeah, that's true.
No, yeah, it's not like I'm just unafraid when it comes to talking about it. It's not that that's all I think about, and it's not that I have to think about it. Like sex became secondary right after I was done studying about sex. Like I took a year out and I was like, okay, everything about sex that there is in this library, I will pick up and read. And I started reading a lot. I never finished the task, but I read a lot. So what fun constitutes for me is, as I come to realize, because Prakhar Ki Pravachan, more so than PG Radio, has been a process of self-knowing than other knowing, than facts about reality and whatnot, right? Yeah. And I found out that I live a very organic life where I want to find out what fun is for me next week. And so fun for me next week is a trek into the wilderness in Himalayas, no shits given. So 3, 4, 5 days, just 4 dudes, no guides, no nothing. That is fun for me right now. I want to challenge myself physically. I want to challenge myself mentally. I want to do X, Y, Z, ABC. And I know to some extent I want to spend time in, I think about it sometimes. It's like एक साल मेरे को ना इजराइल रहना है, एक से भी ऊपर, but roughly एक साल मेरे को इंडोनेशिया भी रहना है, कुछ टाइम मैं यूरोप भी स्पेंड करना चाहता हूँ. So I want to create some sort of a life for me where I can live at an arm's length distance, follow my whims, learn so many things there are to learn. इसीलिए tools have never interested me as such, like tool building. It's all for me. I'm just more of a student still. तो मेरे को सर्फ बोर्ड बनता कैसे is not interesting. सर्फिंग सीखनी है, समझ रहा है? So that is
Yeah.
fun for me. I want to learn how to surf soon. और मेरे को I want to learn how to like play music. I want to be a DJ. I want to maybe write my own books. So and for now, for the next year, that I want to spend time with family. That's what's fun. Spend time with family and friends. It is not funny how much love charge. Somebody was calling me Gurmeet Ram Rahim Singh. I said love charge. Abhi. How much of charging you need on your love battery front? Like, after 3 years of living by myself, facing all kinds of emotional up downs, intellectual up downs, personal up downs, I just needed this chill time with family and people who've known me forever and who know my history and who know where I'm coming from, who know where I'm going. This is the most lion in his den that I feel. When I'm in Delhi, जब दहाड़ूंगा तो फट जाएगी, समझ रहा है? तो that is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to see what the lion in me looks like so I can be a rabbit again soon.
Yeah, that constitutes a framework. I got it. You are right on the path. So you are somewhere, if I'm not wrong, I can say that you are following what Jordan Peterson more or less says, that go through adversity, have fun, but have enough fun such that you can always come back, right? Don't push the threshold too far.
Yeah. See, I think Peterson and I agree on a lot of things.
Same.
That is how I'd say that. I wouldn't see him like that man's been inspirational to me in a way, but as I grow, I have to come to recognize on some level that he's in a very limited way, where I'm a speck of dust and he's a star. He's a contemporary. And so in that, if I use that paradigm to think about it, I'd say there is a lot of things we agree upon.
Okay.
But there's a lot of things we disagree upon. Like his theory of archetypes, I don't sleep with well. I have problems with it. And I'm not smart enough to address them as such, but and I've learned tremendously from him. So ये जो adversity वाला point है ना, bro, this comes from personal understanding, यार. Like my life's never been happy, and I've figured out it just doesn't get happy, man. You just learn to love the pain you're in, and the pain's not necessarily like a physical unbearable pain. It's like this constant search. Like you tell me, hey, 6 months down the line, Prakhar, you're doing great for Pravachan channel, whatever. I don't care. That's not enough for me because mera dimag na is still like hungry. I'm still prowling. Right? And so that is a sort of a pain I like. Every morning waking up to find out I still have like not enough. And one day I need to remember to tell myself you have enough. But up until then, this is the pain I choose. This is the sacrifice I pick. And what Peterson says is pick your sacrifice. What I say is pick your pain, which is sort of the same thing.
Same.
Right? So, and it is an understanding of how neurobiology sort of operates, bro. The fact that you're like, I've tried to chill like a hippie. I've been a communist. Okay. I've lived those lives. I've seen what it feels like to not have purpose. Okay. I've seen what it feels like to not have like everyday things to do. I've seen it. And I was bored of it. And I can tell you, it does not elicit what you want from it. Okay? So like you said, is it sex, just sex? I've seen what serial sex looks like. And I'm telling you, it's not worth it. Right? Of course, have it on the side, as dressing as desert, as whatever. If you're into that, if you're fond of like the human touch, well, bloody hell, go ahead. But if you think that's what your life is, you're going to be so disappointed when you wake up from your 3-day orgy.
That's true.
So that is how it is. So, I mean, also I'm like vehemently atheistic, even though I don't champion the cause of atheism, right? Any question about is there a God to me is please sit back. Please go back and sit down. Please never say that to me again. But at the same time, when people are reducing the argument for is there a God to very simplistic ideas, I'm like, chup. पहले अगर तुम्हें सही argument देना भी है ढंग से दो. ठीक है? तो like you'll see me talk about both those things. I've shat on Javed Akhtar for saying some shit about religion and whatnot. And I've also shat on other people for saying that there is God. I'm like, Kamal ki baat kar rahe ho yaar. Where is the bloody evidence? I've been shat on from both sides of that. And I also think I have, and I don't know if that's a smart thing to do from a career standpoint, but I have also a lot of social commentary to offer. Just a tense that India is is a rather riskier place to begin your social commentary career. So hopefully I do that in some other country at some other point. समझ रहे हो? तो वो भी है at the back of my head. I also have that in my head. Plus yeah, I'm like 1/100th of Jordan Peterson in terms of the amount that he's done for himself. I'm nothing, 1,000th maybe, even lesser, right? Like, so I'm a science enthusiast. I'm not a scientist. You know, there's a difference. That is why I'm like okay with the term, which is like he's a generalist, like some kind of bullshit like that, you know, social commentator, cultural critic kind of definitions, fine, because I'm very loose in that sense. Plus, I also understand that I have a very solid strain of entertainment that Peterson does not. So the general point being key, there is a lot of agreement, but there's a lot of disagreement. Like if you were to ask me what's your ultimate philosophy of life, it's not take your burden, son. Like that's not what I'd say. I'd be like, Abhay, this is all a joke. Have fun. You know?
Yeah.
So there is that difference.
So there is one line.
Yeah,
that is kind of absurd, but I kind of agree with it. So when I actually listened to your podcast with Abhinav Chikara very specifically, there was one line that I love, that I absolutely love. It was when I understood the profound extent of my limitation, was when I understood the profound extent of my liberation. And most people do not come back from that. People don't come back from that nihilistic point of view.
Abey, हाँ यार, तभी तो it is all a grand joke, no?
Yeah.
So you know, you stare into the abyss stares back at you. You fucking stare back at the abyss twice as much. The abyss is like, what the hell did you do? I will stare back at you. The abyss stares back at you. And you get into this staring contest until the first one of you punches. And once you punch, you realize neither are you real nor is the abyss real. And then you both laugh. And then you ask yourself, where is the other? And then you realize, अच्छा, it's all bullshit. ठीक है, चलो घर जाओ. कहने का कोई point नहीं है, ये surrealism है, ठीक है? तो I've never understood. मेरे को ना कई लोगों ने बिठा के बोला है कि ये nihilism का क्या करें? मैं कहता हूँ, bro, आजादी है ना? जा, तू mermaid बन जा, तैर जाके अटलांटिस के पास. किसने रोका है तेरे को? अब कोई नहीं रोक सकता. तेरे पापा कुछ बोल, अरे nihilism, atheism, मौज है, जो करना है कर. तो if you walk down that road, you tend to find you don't matter. None of what you say is relevant. All of this is bullshit. Nobody's going to remember you. You don't remember most of the shit you go through. Your parents don't have enough time to care. Your friends are too busy with their own realities. Fact of the matter is, my existential thesis is that we are deeply bored and lonely and insulated from reality, and we know that. And so, what does that lead to? Either you liberate yourself in a way that Varun says, you know, put yourself in the digital. I think that's putting on another condom. Or you laugh at it till it stops, till it, you know, stops you from laughing.
That's fundamentally true. I agree with that. But you know, so that actually creates a fear. That creates a fear. You see, 20 years down the line,
the fear is that I won't do enough. Right?
No. It's not even. No, अपना नहीं है, bro. अपना नहीं है. अपना sorted है. It's that. Will the world be a utopia or will the world be a dystopia? That's the worry.
It's not your business to think. Yaar,
survive to karna hai.
When you import ideas of the abstract, spiritual, higher moral nature into something that is so entrenched in bloody power like politics is, you get a bad concoctment, you get diarrhea. You don't get a solution. So, well, the question's fair. Sometimes I wonder about it too. Where is this world going? And I think I'm just wired to wonder where this world is going because it doesn't matter once I'm dead. And it doesn't matter when I die. तो ठीक है ना, बहुत खराब हो गया दुनिया, खत्म. किसने बोला है जिंदा रहना है? मैं तो कह रहा हूँ इतनी लिबर्टी है. This is Sartre, no? You have so much freedom, you have no idea. You shit your pants once you find out. Right? ठीक है, पूरी freedom है, मार लो. मैं तो वो भी immoral नहीं समझता. ठीक है, suicide तो किया है, big deal. किसने बोला कि जान relevant है? ये तो एक बड़ा. So the whole process of enlightenment borrowed some shit from the religious without telling it. They were like, okay, one of the things we borrow in the enlightenment political movement is all lives are valuable. Who said all lives are valuable? किसने बोला मेरी जिंदगी valuable है? किसने बोला? और अगर तू कैंसर क्योर करने वाला है और मैं सिर्फ घर बैठ के हिलाने वाला हूं, तो तेरी जिंदगी ज्यादा valuable है कि मेरी जिंदगी ज्यादा valuable है? Politically तो तू जज ही नहीं कर सकता. ये अलाउड ही नहीं है. सेम है. Every life is the same. Every life is the same. ठीक है, तो वो there is a need to avoid seeing a hierarchy in value for life, and that need has its benefits. But on a personal philosophical level, there is no there is no need of you to live. Like you don't matter. Neither do you matter to yourself all that much. You're just afraid of finding out what's after death. It's going to be interesting. So might as well.
कुछ नहीं बोल सकते यार, honestly, like it's a mind.
अबे नहीं मैं suicide encourage नहीं कर रहा. What I'm asking people
but we don't have
to
answers
think
also.
for themselves. Of course I don't. Yeah, I don't. But I don't rationalize them away with spiritual jargon that means nothing to nobody. That's why I hate that. That's the disgust I have. Like, come on, let's be real. Let's think it through. Do you really think this is the answer, or are you making it up?
So that's a disgust that you and I both share.
Because I experienced it. Huh?
That's a disgust that you and I both share in this regard.
I'm glad.
It's very much possible.
I'm glad.
Okay, so let's go a little bit on your personal life here, and your mentorship with Avalon Psychology, right? Is starting. What's your thoughts about it? How are you going to be taking it? Because now you are taking on a professional venture, going into that side. So I want to understand your thoughts here.
Bro, I'm fucking pumped, man. I know. I want to test what it feels like to handle 500 active voices in front of my eyes. I know I'm decent at my job. I'm good at my job.
Yeah.
This is a new challenge. And well, I hope I'm scared. What kind of a challenge would I be taking on if I'm not scared? So, I'm sure part of it is nervousness. Part of it is excitement. I have always fancied the idea of being a teacher, a mentor. Well, I'm no surprises that I am where I am today. And I get to do it when I'm young and not old and boring. So I can relate to my students. I can also, I want to put my sweat and blood into this. This is going to be a bomb, bro. If people think what I've done up until is any sort of impressive, I will shake your core so deep you haven't thought about it. ठीक है? तो और उसका पर्पस सिर्फ ये होगा, देखो बेटा, तुम्हें अभी तक लग रहा था रियलिटी तुम्हारे कंट्रोल में नहीं है. देखो कितनी तुम्हारे कंट्रोल में. Watch. All you have to do is make the move. That's all. Right? So, and then in that process, I'll educate them about the different facets of life. The general point, it's not psychology as much as it's how to use psychology to optimize your life. It's not, I'm not going to teach you concepts like cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
That's not my concern. I'm going to be teaching you what fear says about you, what shames are made out of, what love is made out of. What is the biology of love, and what does it have to say about the storytelling mechanism on which love operates, and what does that have to say about my practical life implication and my financial health, and that is the line that I'm going to make you think along.
Fantastic. So how did that opportunity even arise? Like, from what I understood, like Varun was kind of surprised that, he didn't know that this mentorship was happening. So how did that even, the prospect of it began?
You guys don't understand Varun marketing at all, man.
No, I sometimes do, but sometimes I don't. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't.
I sneaked into the Avalon office and I wrote up a contract, signed it before anybody noticed, and they were like, "Now we got to oblige." I was speaking to Varun. Varun was like, "Do you want to do a pro league?" I was like, "That sounds like a great idea." He's like, "Okay, I'll put you in touch with Shashank and Abhinav." I was like, "Okay, that sounds like a great idea." And then we had a phone call, and that was about it. Uske upar kuch nahi.
Interesting. That's interesting, really. So, I think, and we are about 1 hour, 40 minutes into the conversation right now, and I don't really have a lot to speak about. So let me know, like, is there anything that we have left to speak about? Because although we can go deep into the topic and keep on speaking for hours, we can go do that.
No, I think you covered all the parts that I'd reasonably expect you to be aware about me. And I think you also covered all the parts that I guessed you'd cover about me. I also think I had a good time. I appreciate when somebody makes me think with their questions, and so I had to build on top of what I'd already thought about. That is always a good time. But yeah, I'm pretty satisfied.
See, that's what my goal was. See, a good story has a past, present, and future. We had to start from the past, build a narrative, and then we actually went into the future as to where you go along. I think I have covered that aspect. If there's anything missing, I'm willing to actually have a conversation with regards
No,
to
my
that.
life's not that interesting, you know. My life's not that interesting. It's fine. I think we covered more than enough. People are going to have a great time listening to this.
All right, I'll just stop the recording then here.